Chapter 2 The Indian Contract 1872 Unit 3 Other Essential Elements of a Contract. Unit Overview Essential Element of a Valid Contract. Capacity to contract. Major sound mind, not disqualified. Free consent, not caused by coercion, not caused by undue influence, not caused by fraud, not caused by misrepresentation, not caused by mistake. Lawful consideration and lawful object, not expressly declared to be void. Capacity to contract, free consent, lawful consideration and object, not expressly declared to be void. It has already been discussed that an agreement results from a proposal by one party and its acceptance by the other party. We have already discussed offer, acceptance and consideration in detail. We shall now discuss in detail the elements which constitute a valid contract enforceable in law. Section 10 of the Indian Contract 1872 provides that an agreement, in order to be a contract, must satisfy the following conditions. The parties must be competent to contract. The parties must be competent to contract. It must be made by the free consent of the parties. It must be made for a lawful consideration and with a lawful object. It should not have been expressly declared to be void by law. Capacity to contract, meaning capacity refers to the competence of the parties to make a contract. It is one of the essential elements to form a valid contract. Who is competent to contract? Section 11. Every person is competent to contract who has attained the majority age of majority, age of sound mind, and is not disqualified from contracting by any law to which he is subject. Age of majority in India. The age of majority is regulated by the Indian Majority Act 1875. Every person domiciled in India shall attain the age of majority on the completion of 18 years of age and not before. The age of majority being 18 years, a person less than that age even by a day would be minor for the purpose of contracting. Law relating to minors agreements, position of minor. A contract made with or by a minor is void ab initio. A minor is not competent to contract and any agreement with or by a minor is void from the very beginning. In the leading case of Mohari Devi versus Damodar Das Ghosh 1903, Mr. D, a minor, mortgaged his house for rupees 20,000 to moneylender, but the mortgagee, that is moneylender, has paid him rupees 8,000. Subsequently, the minor has filed a suit for cancellation of contract. Held, the contract is void as Mr. D is minor and therefore he is not liable to pay anything to lender. Mortgage. Therefore, he is not liable to pay anything to lender. No rectification after attaining majority. A minor cannot be ratify the agreement on attaining attaining majority as the original agreement is void ab initio and a void agreement can never be rectified. If a minor makes a promissory note in favor of Y on attaining majority, he cannot ratify it, and if he makes a new promissory note in place of old one, here the new promissory note which he executed after attaining majority is also void, being without consideration. Minor can be a beneficiary or can take benefit out of a contract. Tough, tough. A minor is not competent to contract. Nothing in the Contract Act prevents the minor from making the other party bound to him. Thus, a promissory note duly executed in favor of a minor is not void and can be sued upon by him because he tough incompetent to contract may yet accept a benefit. A minor cannot become partner in a partnership firm. However, he may, with the consent of all the partners, be admitted to the benefits of partnership, be admitted to the benefits of partnership minor. Section 30 of the Indian Partnership Act 1932. A mortgage was executed in favor of a minor. Held, he can get a decree for the enforcement of the mortgage. A minor can always plead minority. A minor can always plead minority and is not supported to do so even where he has taken any loan or entered into any contract by falsely representing that he was major. Rule of estoppel cannot be applied against a minor. It means he can be allowed to PLR, PLR his minority in defense. A. A minor has falsely induced himself as major and contracted with Mr. X for loan of rupees 20,000. When Mr. X asked for the repayment are denied to pay. He pleaded that he was a minor so cannot enter into any contract held or cannot be held liable for repayment of amount. However, if he has not spent the same, he may be asked to repay it, but the minor shall not be liable for any amount which he has already spent, even though even though he even though even though he received the same by fraud. Thus, a minor can always plead minority and is not stopped from doing so even where he had produced a loan or entered into some other contract by falsely representing that he was of full age, when in reality he was a minor. Liability for necessaries. The case of liability for necessaries. The case of necessaries supplied to a minor or to any other person whom such minor is legally bound to support is governed by Section 68 of the Indian Contract Act. A claim for necessary supplied to a minor is enforceable by law, but a minor is not liable for any price that he may promise and never for more than the value of the necessaries. There is no personal liability of the minor, but only his property is liable. But only his property is liable. To render minors state liable for necessaries, two conditions must be satisfied. The contract must be for the goods reasonably necessary for his support in the station in life. The minor must not have already a sufficient supply of these necessaries. Necessaries mean those things that are essentially needed by a minor. They cannot include luxuries or costly or unnecessary articles. Necessaries extend to all such things as reasonable persons would supply to an infant in that class of society to which the infant belongs. Expenses on minors' education, on funeral ceremonies come within the scope of the word necessaries. The whose question turns upon the minor's status in life, utility rather than ornament is the criterion. Shruti, being a minor, purchased a laptop for her online classes of rupees 70,000 on credit from a shop, but her assets could pay only 20,000. The shopkeeper could not hold Shruti personally liable and could recover only amount recoverable uh, through through her assets, that is up to 20,000. Liability for contract by guardian. How far enforceable? तरफ through a minor's agreement is void, his guardian can, under certain circumstances, enter into a valid contract on minor's behalf, where the guardian makes a contract for the minor which is within his competence and which is for the benefit of the minor. There will be valid contract which the minor can enforce, but all contracts made by guardian on behalf of a minor are not valid. For instance, the guardian of a minor has no power to bind the minor by a contract for the purchase of immovable property, but a contract entered into by a certified guardian appointed by the court of a minor with a sanction of the court for the sale of the minor's property may be enforced by either party to the contract, may be enforced by either party to the contract, not specific performance. A minor's agreement being obvious, being absolutely absolutely void, absolutely void. There can be no question of the specific performance of such an agreement. No insolvency. A minor cannot be declared insolvent as he is incapable of contracting debts and dues are payable from the personal properties of minor, and he shall never be held personally liable. Partnership. A minor being incompetent to contract cannot be a partner in a partnership firm, but under Section 30 of the Indian Partnership Act 1932 refers to, he can be admitted to the benefits of partnership. He can be admitted to the benefits of partnership. Minor can be an agent. A minor can act as an agent, but he will not be liable to his principal for his acts. A minor can draw, deliver, and endorse negotiable instruments without himself being liable. A minor can have an account in the bank. He can draw a check for his purchases, but he shall not be liable for check bounces, nor can he be sued under court of law for any fraud done from his account. Minor cannot be bind minor cannot bind parent or guardian in the absence of authority, express or implied. An infant is not capable of binding his parent or guardian even for necessaries. The partners will be held liable only when the child is acting as an agent for parents. Agent for parents. Richa, a minor, entered into contract of buying a scooty from the dealer and mentioned that her parents will be liable for the payment of scooty. The dealer sent the dealer sent a letter to her parents for money. The parents will not be liable for such payment as the contract was intended by a minor in their absence and out of their knowledge. Out of their knowledge. Joint contract by minor and adult. In such a case, the adult will be liable on the contract and not the liable minor. In Sen Das versus Ramchand, where there was a joint purchase by two purchasers, one of them was a minor. It was held that the vendor could enforce the contract against the major purchaser and not the minor purchaser. The minor. Surety guarantor for a minor in a contract of guarantee when an adult stands surety for a minor, then he adult is liable to third party as there is direct contract between the surety and the third party. Then he adult is liable to third party as there is direct contract between the surety and the third party. Mr. X guaranteed for the purchase of a mobile by Chris, a minor. In case of failure of payment by Chris, Mr. X will be liable to make the payment. Minor has shareholder. A minor being incomplete to contract cannot be a shareholder of the company. If by mistake he becomes a member, the company can rescind the transaction and remove his name for register. But a minor may acting tough acting through his lawful guardian become a shareholder by transfer of transmission of fully paid shares to him. Liability for torts. A tort is a civil wrong. A minor is liable in tort unless the tort in reality is a breach of contract. Thus, whether a where a minor borrowed a horse for riding only, he was held liable when he lent the horse to one of his friends who jumped and killed the horse. Similarly, a minor was held liable for his failure to return certain instruments which he had hired and then passed on to a friend. Liability for torts. A tort is a civil wrong. A minor is liable in tort unless unless the unless the tort in reality in a breach of contract. Thus, where a minor borrowed a horse for riding, he held liable when he lent the horse to one of his friends, who jumped and killed the horse. Similarly, a minor was held liable for his failure to return certain instruments which he had hired and then passed on to a friend and then passed on to a friend. Person of sound mind. According to section 12 of the Indian Contract 1872, a person is said to be of sound mind for the purposes of making a contract if at the time when he makes it is capable of understanding it and of forming a rational judgment as to its effect upon his interests. A person who is usually of unsound mind but but occasionally of sound mind may make a contract when he is of sound mind. A person who is usually of sound mind but occasionally of unsound mind may not make a contract when he is of unsound mind. A a patent in a lunatic asylum who is at intervals of sound mind may contract during those intervals. A sane man who is delirious from fever or who is so drunk that he cannot understand the terms of a contract or form a rational judgment has to its effect on his interests cannot contract will whilst such delirium or drunkenness lasts. Position of unsound mind person making a contract. A contract by a person who is not of sound mind is void. Position of unsound mind person making a contract. A contract by a person who is not of sound mind is void. Contract by disqualified persons. Besides minors and persons persons of unsound mind, there are also other persons who are disqualified from contracting, partly or wholly, so that the contracts by such person are void, so that the contracts by such person are void. Incompetency to contract may arise from political status, corporate status, legal status, etc. The following persons fall in this category: foreign sovereign foreign sovereigns and ambassadors, ambassadors, alien enemy corporations, convicts, insolvent, etc. Free consent. Consent is not free when it is coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation, mistake. Coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation. Contract is voidable. Mistake. Contract is void. Unilateral mistake. Nature of contract has to identify a person. Has to identify a person. Contract is void. Bilateral mistake has to subject matter. Possibility of performance. Bilateral mistake has to subject matter. Possibility of performance. Definition of consent according to Section 13 of the Indian Contract Act. Two or more persons are said to consent when they agree upon the same thing in the same sense. Parties are said to have consented when they not only agreed upon the same thing but also agreed upon that thing in the same sense. Same thing must be understood as the whole content of the agreement. Consequently, when parties to a contract make some fundamental errors as to the nature of the transaction or as to the person dealt with or as to the subject matter of the agreement, it cannot be said that they have agreed upon the same thing in the same sense, and if they do not agree in the same sense, there can be consent. There, there can be consent. A contract cannot arise in the absence of consent. There cannot be consent. A contract cannot arise in the absence of consent. If two persons enter into an apparent contract concerning a particular person or ship, and it turns out that each of them, misled by similarity of name, had a different person or ship in his mind, no contract would exist between them as they were not ad idem, that is, of the same mind. Again, ambiguity in the terms of an agreement or an error as to the nature of any transaction or has to the subject matter of any agreement may prevent the formation of any contract on the ground of absence of consent. In the case of fundamental error, there is really no consent, whereas in the case of mistake, there is no real consent. There is no real consent. As has been said already, one of the essential elements of a contract is consent, and there cannot be a contract without consent. Consent may be free or not free. Only free consent is necessary for the validity of a contract. Only free consent is necessary for the validity of a contract. Definition of free consent, section 14 of the Indian Contract 1872. Consent is said to be free when it is not caused by coercion, section 15, undue influence, section 16, fraud, section 17, misrepresentation, section 18, mistake, subject to the provisions of sections 20, 21, 22. When consent to an agreement is caused by coercion, fraud, misrepresentation, or undue influence, the agreement is a contract voidable at the option of the party whose consent was so caused. When the consent is betrayed by mistake, the contract becomes void. When the consent is betrayed by mistake, the contract becomes void. Elements betraying free consent. We shall now explain these elements one by one. Coercion, section 15 of the Indian Contract 1872. Coercion is the committing or pretending to commit any act forbidden by the Indian Penal Code the or the lawful detaining or threatening to detain any property to the prejudice of any person whatever, with the intention of causing any person to enter into an agreement. It is to be noted that the section does not require that coercion must proceed from a party to the contract, nor is it necessary that subject of the coercion must be of the other contracting party. It may be directed against any third person. It may be directed against any. It may be directed against any third person whatever. Effects of coercion under section 19 of the Indian Contract 1872. Effects of coercion, section 19. Contract undue by coercion is voidable at the point option of the party whose consent was so obtained. A person who a person to whom money has been paid or anything delivered under coercion must reply or return it. Section 72 of the Indian Contract. Threat to commit suicide, whether is it coercion. Suicide, though forbidden by Indian Penal Code, is not punishable. As a dead man cannot be punished. But Section 15 declares that committing or pretending to commit any act forbidden by Indian Penal Code is coercion. Hence are treated to commit suicide will be regarded as coercion, where husband obtained a release deed from his wife and son under a threat of committing suicide. The transaction was set arise on the ground of coercion, suicide being forbidden by the Indian Penal Code. An agent refused to give books of accounts to the principal unless he frees him from all his liabilities. The principal has had to give the release deed. Held the contract was under coercion by unlawful detaining of the principal's property. An agent refused to give books of accounts of the principal unless he frees him from all his liabilities. The principal had to give the release deed. Held the contract was under coercion by unlawful detaining of the principal's property. Undue influence. Section 16 of the Indian Contract 1872. According to Section 16 of the Indian Contract 1872, a contract is said to be induced by undue influence where the relations substanting between the parties are such that one of the parties is in a position to dominate the will of the other, and he uses that position to obtain an unfair advantage over the other. A having advanced money to his son B during his minority, upon B's coming of age of obtains by measures of parental influence a bond from B for a greater amount than the sum due in respect of the advance. A employs A employs undue influence. The essential ingredients under this provision are relation between the parties. A person can be influenced by the other when a near relation between the two exists. position to dominate the will. Relation between the parties exist in such a manner that one of them is in a position to dominate the will of the other. A person is deemed to be in such position in the following circumstances: real and apparent authority, where a person holds a real authority over the other, as in the case of master and servant, doctor and patient, and etc. A father, by reason of his authority over the son, can dominate the will of the son. Fiduciary relationship, where relation of trust and confidence exist between the parties of a contract. Such type of relationship exists between father and son. Solicitor and silent, husband and wife, creditor and debtor, etc. By reason of fiduciary relationship, a solicitor can dominate the will of his silent, and a trustee can dominate the will of the beneficiary. A spiritual guru induced his devotee to gift to him the whole of his property in return of a promise of salvation of the devotee. Held the consent of the devotee was given under undue influence. Here the relationship was fiduciary relationship between guru and devotee, and guru was in a position to dominate the will of devotee. Mental distress, undue undue influence can be used against a person to get his consent on a contract where the mental capacity of the person is temporarily or permanently affected by the reason of mental or bodily distress, illness, or of old age. Illness or of old age. A doctor is deemed to be in a position to dominate the will of his patient in enfeebled by protracted illness, unconscionable bargains, where one of the parties to a contract is in a position to dominate the will of the other, and the contract is apparently unconscionable, that is unfair. It is presumed by law that consent must have been obtained by undue influence. Unconscionable bargains are witnessed mostly in money lending transactions and in gifts. A. Being in debt to B. The money lender of his blade. Contracts are fresh loan on terms which appear to be unconscionable. It it lies on B to prove that the contract was not induced by undue influence. A applies to a banker for a loan at a time when there is a stringency in money market. The banker declines to make the loan except at unusually high rate of interest. A accepts the loan on these terms. This is a transaction in the ordinary course of business, and the contract is not undue, and the contract is not induced by undue influence. The object must be to take undue advantage, where the person is in a position to influence the will of the other. In getting consent must have the object to take advantage of the other. A teacher asked her daughter to get married to one of his brilliant students. Both the girl and boy were smart. Both the girl and boy were smart, settled, and intelligent. Here the teacher had a relation which can have influence on both of them, but has no undue advantage of such undue influence was taken. Such contract of marriage is said to be made by free consent. Burden of proof. When a party to contract decide to avoid the contract on the ground of undue influence, he has to prove that the other party is in position to dominate his will. The other party is actually used in position to obtain his consent. Transaction in unfair or unconscionable. Transaction is unfair or unconscionable. Effects effect of effects of undue influence. Section 19A. Section 19A clause नहीं है. When consent to an agreement is caused by undue influence, the agreement is a contract voidable at the option of the party whose consent was so called. Any such contract may be set aside either absolutely or if the party who was entitled to avoid it has received any benefit thereunder upon such terms and conditions has to the court may seem just a a man lender advantages 1 lakh rupees to be an agriculturist and by undue influence induces B to execute a bond for 2 lakh rupees with interest at 6% per month. The court may set aside the bond, ordering B to reply 1 lakh rupees with such interest as may seem just fraud. Section 17 of the Indian Contract defined